In this story, our protagonist was an old elderly swordsman, but he ends up dying, and the goddess of that world gives him the chance to be reborn. And just like that, he reincarnates in the body of a young man. But it seems like that goddess wanted to chuck mess with him, because the guy was reborn in a world where everyone possessed insanely powerful magic while he only knew how to use a sword. This series is actually really good, guys. And on top of that, there's an extremely adorable waifu that I already liked from the very first chapter. Real subscribers already know what to do. Leave a like and comment part 2. Without wasting any more time, let's get into the video. The story begins with an old swordmaster, aware that his days were numbered. He knew his prime was long gone. His mortal body was at its limit, and he had felt it for a long time. Still, his quest for mastery never ceased. He felt his sword technique was still progressing, incomplete, a lifetime dedicated to a single goal, mastering the blade to its absolute and infinite peak. But every journey has an end. However, the sword's journey was far from over. Now in other hands, the same blade was firmly wielded. A young swordsman inherited that legacy. He wasn't alone. A girl accompanied him closely, apprehensive about the path they were on. Suddenly, their path was blocked by a mysterious group. Their leader smirked arrogantly, making it clear he disliked the young man's presence. He warned he'd teach a lesson. Those who stand out too much end up crushed. The girl was startled by the threat, but the young swordsman didn't flinch an inch. A shower of ice spears was conjured, heading straight for the two of them. Faced with the ice shower, the swordsman was unfazed. He prepared for a counterattack. With a swift movement, he charged against the magic. The young man sliced every ice fragment coming his way, completely destroying the spell. But the enemy didn't stop and conjured an even more powerful technique, an avalanche. A massive wall of ice descended upon him. It seemed like the end. The elf simply couldn't believe what she was seeing. The swordsman cut the avalanche in half as if it were nothing. Furious, the enemy captain warned him not to get cocky. He then unleashed a technique that accelerated his magic, combining ice and lightning in a devastating attack. But the young man also had an ace up his sleeve. He gripped his blade firmly, and then he unleashed the power sealed within it, invoking the Imagui technique. With his sword raised, he was ready to display the true power of a swordsman. His companions could barely process the amount of power emanating from him. With a single strike, he completely dispersed the captain's spell. From afar, a girl watched everything with a smile. She seemed to know it would happen. After the final strike, the swordsman's consciousness unraveled. A voice echoed in his mind, asking if he hadn't suffered enough already. He wondered where he was. Was it a dream? Or perhaps the glimpse one gets at the threshold of death? His body, now aged, floated in an endless void. The battle had finally taken its toll. Suddenly, a gentle presence emerged from the darkness. Before him, a divine figure welcomed him into the realm between life and death. But even facing the end, the old warrior showed no fear. He merely analyzed the situation calmly. The woman introduced herself as a goddess. She explained that for having surpassed human limits in life, his soul would be rewarded. A lifetime dedicated to solitary battle had made him worthy. The goddess then offered him a place in celestial paradise, a utopia where he could find all kinds of happiness, free from any conflict. The swordsman, however, had only one question. He wanted to know if there would be swords in that paradise. The goddess replied no. For a man who lived and died by the sword, a paradise without it held no value. He refused the offer. The goddess seemed to understand. She then offered an alternative, reincarnation in another world. The swordsman accepted the offer without hesitation. A new life, in a new world, was all he could ask for. The goddess smiled. She had already expected that answer. With a simple gesture, she began the transfer process. The deity promised to send his existence to another world, leaving behind the bloody past for a new beginning. And as a gift, he could take with him the power of a single strike from his old sword. She confessed that gods are always interested in human potential. And then she sent him on his journey. Her gaze was intense, as if observing the unfolding of a grand plan. His destination was Magia Heim, a world where magic reigns supreme. At the last second, the goddess remembered a crucial detail about the world she was sending him to. And so the swordsman awoke. In an unknown forest, in a new body, he stood up, already preparing for whatever came next. The blade in his hand was simple, but still a partner. He knew he would need to rely on it again. That's when it clicked. He remembered the name of that place, Magia Heim, and tried to understand what it truly meant. With a clearer mind, he defined his first objectives: food, shelter, and clothes. Survival was the priority, but above all, he yearned for one thing: to find a worthy rival and feel the thrill of combat once more. And it seems fate heard his prayers. A cry of despair echoed through the forest, catching the swordsman's attention. Without hesitation, he moved in the direction of the sound. Something was happening, and what he found caught him by surprise. As he moved, he noticed something incredible. His new body was absurdly light and fast. The scene was clear: a young girl alone and completely cornered by a pack of wolves. Despair consumed her. There was nowhere to run. Surrounded, the girl braced for the worst, facing the approaching beasts. Then, one of the wolves lunged for the final attack. She closed her eyes, believing she would die right there. But death did not come. In a flash, the swordsman appeared and intercepted the attack, eliminating the threat with a single strike. He stood in front of the girl, calm and focused. The first threat was gone. Still on the ground, the girl looked at her savior, unable to believe what had just happened. The job was done, quick and clean. Without turning, he commented on the dangerous situation she was in. The battle wasn't over yet. The girl still on the ground looked at her savior. To her he was a samurai. Fear gave way to admiration. She began to cheer for him with all her might. And he was right. The rest of the pack prepared for the attack, surrounding the young swordsman. But for the swordsman that was no challenge. In a single movement he advanced and cut through the beasts. The result was quick and brutal. End of story. With the threat neutralized, the swordsman sheathed his blade. His calm was almost unsettling. The display of power was enough to scare away what remained of the pack. With the problem resolved, he finally turned to the girl, concerned if she was hurt. The young woman could barely believe she was alive. Relief washed over her. With an emotional smile she thanked him profusely for saving her. He replied humbly, stating he was still in the middle of his training. His reaction was pure surprise. What she said next left him confused. The girl realized she might have said something wrong and tried to correct herself. Then she tried to explain the reason for the confusion, mentioning he seemed to be from a foreign country. She introduced him to the kingdom of Arcadia, a prosperous place where, apparently, swordsmen were uncommon. The young woman explained that in this world the art of the sword had been practically forgotten. The news caught the swordsman by surprise. A world without swords? Seeing his confusion, the girl approached and formally introduced herself. He reflected on what she said. Magic and sorcery had taken the blade's place. His only skill was considered useless in that place. To thank him, the young woman offered to be his guide in the royal capital. The swordsman accepted and introduced himself as Ayame. The agreement was sealed with a handshake. As they walked, Ayame asked about the place. She replied they were in the great forest of Arcadia. She explained the forest was dangerous even for mages. Ayame then questioned why she, Luna, was alone there. Luna admitted her skills were focused on healing and support, not combat. The swordsman listened intently, understanding her situation. She seemed embarrassed by her weakness. To change the subject, Luna asked where Ayame had come from. The question hung in the air as they continued their way out of the forest. Confronted with Luna's question, Ayame had to think fast. He couldn't reveal he was from another world. He gave a vague answer, but it seemed to be enough for the girl for now. With the matter settled, they finally continued on their way. And there it was, imposing in the distance, the royal capital. As they approached the gates, the first barrier appeared. An inspection was required to enter. A guard approached them, asking for their identification documents to allow passage. Ayame froze for an instant. He had no documents from that world, until he remembered a card the goddess had given him. The guard examined the item and, to Ayame's relief, confirmed everything was in order. The guard warned that the gates were heavy, but Ayame decided to take the lead. With a single push, he moved the massive wooden and iron structure. What should have been a difficult task he made look easy. With the path clear, he simply called Luna to enter. The guard and Luna were in shock. Those gates were meant to be opened with magic, not brute force. Ayame just smiled, acting as if it was nothing special. The guard was speechless, shocked by Ayame's strength. He couldn't believe the young man opened the gate with one hand. Still astonished, the guard warned Ayame that this place was particularly harsh on swordsmen and that he should prepare himself. He looked at the young man with a serious expression, as if he were evaluating him. After giving the warning, the guard simply watched them leave, reflecting on what he had just witnessed. Walking through the city, Ayame confirmed what the guard and Luna had said. No one else carried a sword. Seeing he had nowhere to go, Luna offered to take him to her home, but the swordsman soon noticed they were being watched by suspicious figures on the street. The men stared at him with a strange smile, clearly interested in the outsider. Ayame wasn't intimidated. He simply walked on, keeping his hand close to his sword. Soon after, they arrived. Luna welcomed him into her home with a gentle smile. Upon entering, Ayame asked about her parents. Luna explained they were working during the day. The young woman asked him to wait a moment, saying she would prepare some tea for him. She then served a cup, even saying the tea wasn't of the best quality. Ayame reassured her. For him, what mattered was her kind gesture. The comment made Luna blush, and she shyly thanked him for the compliment. Luna explained the tea was local, asking if it was Ayame's first time. He confirmed. The young woman was relieved to know he enjoyed the tea, but Ayame's mind was already elsewhere. He needed to understand this new world, a world where magic dictated all rules and held supreme power. Luna acknowledged Ayame was a strong swordsman, but warned him society was cold and cruel to people like him. In this kingdom, everyone, from nobles to commoners, despised those who relied on the sword. This, however, didn't faze the young man. On the contrary, Ayame declared he would overcome any adversity, as challenges only made training more valuable. His determination left Luna impressed. For an instant she thought he might be the solution to her problems, but she held back. It was too soon to involve him. Ayame then changed the subject. He needed a job, preferably one where he could use his sword. Luna had an idea and suggested he register as an adventurer, just like her. She explained how it worked, completing quests, like hunting monsters or gathering materials, in exchange for a reward. Following her advice, Luna took him to the Adventurers Guild. The place was much larger than Ayame expected. Looking inside, he confirmed his suspicions. There wasn't another swordsman in sight. At the guild counter, Ayame got straight to the point. He wanted to register as an adventurer. The receptionist greeted him with a smile, ready to begin the process. The young man awaited instructions, maintaining his serious expression. To start, she asked him to place his hand on a measuring crystal. The attendant explained that the initial rank was always FEF, but high magic power could ensure a better position. Ayame then extended his hand over the orb. For an instant, a powerful golden light exploded from the crystal. The reaction was so strong it left the receptionist in shock. But it was just imagination. In reality, there was no reaction at all. The silence that followed was awkward for both of them. The young woman felt awkward. It meant he barely possessed any magical power. The silence was broken by the laughter of the other adventurers in the hall. They openly began to mock him. A swordsman in an age of magic. Ayame understood immediately. This was the contempt swordsman received here. He looked at the men ridiculing him, absorbing every word. Ayame stared at the man provoking him. He wasn't going to let that slide. The taunting continued. The adventurer decided he'd teach the rookie a lesson, and without a second thought he launched a fireball. The attack flew towards Ayame. But to everyone's surprise, Ayame simply dispelled it with his hand. The aggressors couldn't believe their eyes. The magic had simply vanished. It still hadn't dawned on them. Ayame thanked them for the demonstration. He said it was very informative. The commotion caught the attention of the guild receptionist. She had an important question: if he was capable of nullifying magic. Ayame explained he wasn't. He just used some of his ki-all to push away the fire. Without further questions, she handed him his adventurer card. The receptionist explained the basics: exploring, hunting monsters, and gathering materials. With the card in hand, Ayame was officially a guild member, but her expression was serious. She knew his registration, without magic, was just the start of more trouble. As Ayame familiarized himself with his new status, Luna explained the guild always needed more people. Suddenly, the crowd's attention turned to the entrance. A commotion began to form among the adventurers. The cause of the commotion was the arrival of Lord Carter, heir to one of the great magical families. His presence was imposing, exactly what was expected of a noble of his caliber. It was then that Carter's eyes landed on Luna and Ayame. Pausing to observe them, completely ignoring the swordsman, he addressed Luna. He wanted to know if she had considered his proposal. The young woman turned pale, visibly uncomfortable with the sudden approach. Carter pressed the matter, pushing for an answer in front of everyone. Luna remained paralyzed, unable to utter a single word. The noble stared down at her, awaiting an answer she couldn't give. Seeing the situation, Ayame stepped in front of her. He excused himself, interrupting the conversation. Lord Carter's expression changed instantly. He clearly didn't like the interruption, but Ayame didn't back down. He stared back at the noble, with a serious gaze. Unexpectedly, the noble burst out laughing. The young man's audacity seemed to amuse him. He laughed openly, treating Ayame's intervention as a joke. Lord Carter stopped laughing. He leaned in and mocked Ayame, a mere swordsman without magic. The noble reminded him of what everyone said. A warrior without magic was destined to fail as an adventurer. Carter's amusement vanished, replaced by a menacing aura. His mana began to leak. He was furious. How dared an insignificant commoner get in his way? The sudden change in mood caught Ayame and Luna by surprise. The situation was getting out of hand. Carter then offered to teach Ayame what happened to those who challenged a count. Luna, desperate, tried to intervene, explaining that Ayame was new to the country and didn't understand the customs. But the young man stopped her. He bowed himself, apologizing on her behalf to calm the situation. The noble seemed to accept, but imposed a condition to drop the matter. However, Ayame stood up and questioned if it was a mage's nature to use their power to oppress others. The audacity was the last straw. A noble servant stepped forward, outraged by the disrespect shown to his master. He decided to teach Ayame a lesson with his own hands, conjuring a fire spell. A shower of fireballs flew towards the swordsman, who remained motionless. Suddenly the spell vanished into thin air. The servant understood nothing. His magic simply disappeared. Ayame observed the outcome and realized one thing: there were different levels of proficiency even in magic. The hooded woman was in shock. Lord Eric, the noble, decided to intervene personally. He conjured a much more powerful spell. A bolt of pure magical energy struck Ayame, but the swordsman blocked it. Eric finally understood. His sword nullified magic. He accused Ayame of being trash who only won because of an artifact. The noble called him an incompetent fool, saying it was pathetic to rely on a tool. Eric's servants couldn't believe their eyes. The noble stared at Ayame. His patience had run out. While one servant seemed nervous, the other smiled, amused by the commotion. Eric's gaze was cold. He wasn't going to let it slide. Before everyone, the noble approached Ayame's group to deliver his message. He gave Luna an ultimatum, saying he'd give them time until their next encounter. Ayame listened to the threat in silence. Afterward, Eric turned to the swordsman and promised that, as his noble duty, he would educate him one day. Without responding, Ayame simply took Luna's hand. He pulled her away. That confrontation was over for now. After the commotion, Ayame took Luna to a quieter place, away from trouble. Sitting on a bench, the young woman still seemed confused by everything that had happened. Ayame then began to explain his reasons with unexpected calm. Luna was surprised by his words. She asked if he could tell her the details, offering to help with whatever was needed. The young woman didn't understand why he would go so far to help her, risking so much for her. His answer was simple: it was because she had been kind to him. For a swordsman like him, in a world that didn't value them, that meant a lot. Ayame's words left her completely flustered. She recalled that he taught her about the country and even made tea. To her, these were small things, but for Ayame, it wasn't. He then revealed that as someone reincarnated in that world, his perspective was different. He had already received many scornful glances. In this world, it was common for mages to look down on swordsmen. He felt it firsthand. Therefore, the genuine help he received from her was something rare and extremely valuable, and that kindness was more than enough reason for him to risk everything to repay her. After hearing Ayame's story, Luna took him to a quieter place so they could talk. She then gathered her courage and asked if he would be willing to hear her story too. Luna began by saying she grew up in a happy family, and from an early age showed a talent for magic. Meanwhile, her father went to the royal capital, hoping to start a new business. Ayame listened to everything attentively. The plan was simple: sell their village's special products in the capital. One day, her father returned home beaming, with the news that he had secured a contract with a count's family. But that's when everything started to go wrong. The contract terms were altered without their knowledge. The family was charged absurd fees, and all their profits went to paying off the debt. The story was starting to get heavy. When her father tried to protest, he was forcibly restrained. Challenging a noble was strictly forbidden. From working so hard to pay the debt, he eventually collapsed from exhaustion. Ayame remained silent, absorbing every detail of that injustice. She and her mother did their best to keep working, but they soon reached their limit. That's when Lord Eric, the Count's family heir, appeared with a proposal. Luna began to explain Lord Eric's proposal. He said if she worked for him, her family's debt would be eased. The work, however, was humiliating. The Lord wanted to use her for his own amusement. Desperate for money, she tried to form an adventurer group, but couldn't find anyone. The young woman felt completely cornered and hopeless. Ayame understood the scheme. Lord Eric was manipulating everything behind the scenes, not for money but to have Luna herself. The swordsman listened to the story in silence, the injustice of the situation weighing heavily on him. It was in this desperation that she decided to risk everything alone in the great forest, where she ended up finding him. Ayame comforted her, showing that he understood how difficult everything had been. That simple gesture of empathy was enough. Luna couldn't hold back anymore and broke down crying. He watched her, his expression becoming even more serious and determined. Ayame then said that power doesn't exist to oppress. He believed strength should be used to protect. He remembered the countless battles he fought. All of them in the end were because he had something or someone to defend. That was the true reason he wielded his sword. The swordsman explained that Bushido, his code, is also a path that values protection above all else. And that was a promise he carried in the steel of his blade. Luna remembered the promise he made, the promise of a samurai who protected her when no one else did. Those words still echoed in her heart. She recalled the day they met. Among so many adventurers, Ayame invited her to form a group. The young woman couldn't contain her emotion at the unexpected proposal. He offered to be the front line, trusting her to provide support from the rear. The idea of having a true companion left her speechless. After all, she didn't have the best reputation and always ended up in complicated situations. Even so, Luna tried to convince herself that she didn't need to be afraid of him. But it was Ayame who reassured her, promising that as long as they were together, everything would be fine. The swordsman's confidence was enough to calm her heart. For the first time in a long while, Luna felt a genuine spark of hope. Ayame said a smile suited her better, and that it was time to leave sadness behind. However, someone was silently watching the scene from afar. Ayame sensed the shift in the atmosphere, and his hand instinctively went to his sword hilt. With their partnership sealed, they decided their next move. They would venture together to change their lives. Full of energy, Luna proposed the duo's first challenge, exploring a dungeon. She already envisioned the adventure facing monsters side by side with her new partner. But for that, the first step was to go to the Adventurers Guild. Once there, they headed straight to the quest board to find a job. Ayame picked one of the available quests from the board. It was a dungeon quest, exactly what Luna had wanted. Ayame analyzed the details. He thought it best to start with something low risk. But there was a problem. He reminded her that, being rank FF, she couldn't take rank D quests. As they talked, Ayame noticed other adventurers watching them, but Luna resolved the situation. Since the quest was his rank, she said she'd handle the paperwork. At that, the other adventurers started whispering about the newcomer, the swordsman from the east. They scoffed, saying a rookie wouldn't last a day, especially with killers like the Ripper on the loose. Suddenly, a voice interrupted him. A noble called him by name Eric and directly insulted him. Ayame replied coldly. He said he only respected those who deserved it, and the noble wasn't one of them. The response, instead of irritating the noble, seemed to amuse him. He hadn't heard such defiance in a long time. Ayame listened to the noble's speech, who boasted about his power and status. He claimed nobles were superior in magic and that commoners should be grateful for the protection they received. The noble seemed amused to notice that Ayame truly believed in his ideals of justice. But the swordsman retorted, saying that having power didn't give anyone the right to oppress others. The conversation shifted. The noble revealed his sick interest in Luna, stating he would take her for himself. He confessed that just thinking about having her made him anxious. A veiled and disgusting threat. The provocation hit hard. Ayame's patience was quickly running out. The noble then mocked Ayame's ambition, saying that for a mere swordsman, getting rich in the dungeon was an impossible dream. He treated him as inferior, but Ayame wasn't intimidated. He replied that they'd only know if they tried. That's when the threat became explicit. The noble hoped Ayame would suffer an accident in there. He approached with a fake smile, placing a hand on Ayame's shoulder in an intimidating way. He reminded him that the mortality rate in dungeons was high. That sounded like a final warning. At that moment, Luna appeared, announcing the paperwork was ready, oblivious to the tension in the air. With the bureaucracy handled, they finally turned towards the dungeon entrance. Luna seemed excited, commenting on how challenging that dungeon could be. They stood before one of the most challenging dungeons in the world. Without wasting time, Ayame and Luna began descending through the corridors. The path was guarded by sinister statues, a bad omen of what was to come. Luna, however, seemed excited and began explaining the mission details. Their objective lay on the deepest floors of that place. The task was simple: collect bronze ore on the 10th floor. Seeing that Ayame didn't understand magic, Luna offered to teach him on the way. The young man listened carefully, curious to understand how this world worked. She explained that magic was a mana-activated ability, with 5 basic elements. Fire, water, ice, lightning, and wind were the pillars of all magical power. But there were also other types of magic, such as enchantments and defenses. Luna said that in ancient times, spells required complex rituals, but the process was simplified over time. Nowadays, a single phrase was enough to activate a devastating power. The most skilled mages didn't even need to speak, casting in absolute silence. Because of this speed, swordsmen were at a disadvantage. The world was dominated by magic. Luna looked at Ayame, impressed by his determination. He held his sword, ready to prove the worth of his path. She found him incredible for not being shaken, even with the world against him. Soon after, Luna spotted the stairs to the next floor, full of optimism. The young woman was excited to continue exploring the dungeon. She urged Ayame on, eager to go down and move forward. But suddenly, Ayame's expression changed. He sensed a presence. They were being followed. Just below, the threat revealed itself. They were goblins. Luna warned him to be careful, explaining that goblins were cunning creatures. But the warning didn't faze the swordsman. He prepared for combat. Ayame observed the dark corridor ahead of him. Without hesitation, he charged against the group of monsters. His strike was swift and precise, a clean cut towards the enemy. But something went wrong. The blade didn't pierce. The monster was tougher than it seemed. With the power received, Ayame's blade finally found its target. The massacre began. Luna explained that the monster's magic defense was the problem. Ordinary swordsmen wouldn't stand a chance. The situation required a new strategy, and fast. They had agreed that Luna would stay in the rear, providing support. It was time to put the plan into action. The young woman wasted no time. She cast a spell to weaken the goblin's movements. The effect was immediate, making the monsters slower and more vulnerable. Next, Luna used her magic to strengthen Ayame's body. The swordsman felt power flowing through him. His companion's magic was impressive. Now strengthened, he charged forward. No goblin could resist his attack. After the fight, Luna commented that he was so incredible he barely needed her help. But Ayame disagreed, praising her magic. The compliment made the young woman blush. He admitted that, without Luna's support, that many enemies would have been a serious problem. The swordsman reflected on the importance of magic defense, a weakness he would need to overcome. Luna noticed he was thoughtful. The dungeon still held many challenges ahead. Luna then turned to Ayame, with a tone of admiration in her voice. She remarked that despite being the same age, he seemed incredibly calm and mature. The swordsman thought to himself, it was to be expected, since in his past life he was over 80 years old. They continued advancing through the dungeon, but the silence was too heavy. Ayame then asked Luna to use her magic and search for enemies in the area. The young woman concentrated, preparing the detection spell. Magical energy spread through the corridor, but what she felt was so overwhelming it threw her backward. Luna was completely paralyzed with fear. She stammered, warning that a gigantic monster was coming their way. Heavy footsteps made the stone floor tremble. The girl pointed into the darkness, unable to form words. The shock was evident on her face. Before them, a griffin appeared, a high-level monster that shouldn't be on that floor. Ayame stared at the creature, preparing his sword. The situation had just gotten much more serious. The creature was a griffin. Luna was paralyzed, but Ayame was already preparing, telling her to get back. The danger was real. Despite the tension, the young man remained focused. Luna, on the other hand, could barely believe the size of the threat that had appeared. The monster didn't wait. It let out a deafening roar, charged with power and electricity. Without a second's hesitation, Ayame drew his sword. The fight was inevitable. He placed himself in front of Luna, taking responsibility. That monster was his problem now. Luna tried to help, preparing a support spell to strengthen Ayame, but she soon realized it would be useless. Her low-level magic wouldn't affect such a powerful monster. With magical support discarded, only one option remained: Ayame's brute force. The swordsman positioned himself, ready for combat. He analyzed the creature, which already seemed to have some injuries from previous battles. The griffin attacked first, with overwhelming fury, trying to crush him. The monster's paw destroyed the floor where Ayame had been seconds before. He narrowly escaped. Seeing the opening, the young man wasted no time and charged straight at the enemy. He leaped, using the momentum for a precise aerial attack. The blade struck the griffin's beak directly, but the creature barely felt the impact. Its defense was too solid. The previous attack didn't work. So, mid-fall, Ayame prepared his next move. He concentrated a golden energy into his blade. With a touch, the power was channeled throughout the metal. The entire sword began to glow, releasing a powerful aura. With the weapon imbued, Ayame prepared for the true attack. He advanced with speed, aiming for a vital point on the creature. The griffin was hit by multiple blows all at once. Luna also took advantage of the opening. She saw through the monster's defense and attacked. Enraged, the creature ignored the others and focused all its anger on Ayame. The monster's paw came down to crush him, but the young man was already expecting it. He used the griffin's attack as momentum to launch himself upward. The counterattack was precise, hitting the creature's eye squarely. Ayame went straight past the monster, finishing the move with precision. The wound was severe, but the griffin realized the cut wasn't deep enough to finish it off. Consumed by pain and fury, the monster let out a deafening roar. Ayame descended with his sword, frustrated that he hadn't managed a clean, fatal cut on the first try. Even so, the blow struck the griffin's neck with devastating force. Life drained from the creature's eyes, and it finally collapsed, powerless. The monster's gigantic body fell behind him. The battle was over. Luna watched everything, completely shocked by the young swordsman's strength. Ayame turned to her with a smile, remembering he had promised victory. But the celebration was short-lived. Examining the other monsters' bodies, he noticed something strange. The wounds indicated that the creatures weren't at full strength when they attacked them. Someone else was there. Someone who merely toyed with the beasts before leaving them behind. And at that moment, applause echoed through the ruins. A new figure revealed himself. A silver-haired man and his guards watched them with an air of superiority. Luna immediately went on alert, but Ayame remained calm, analyzing the situation. Without beating around the bush, the swordsman asked if they were responsible for sending the griffin after them. The man, who introduced himself as Eric, dodged the question. He said he had a proposition. Tension filled the air. The noble seemed to enjoy the situation, while Ayame stared at him seriously. Eric's proposal was not what they expected. Luna was in shock, while Ayame stared at him intently. With a mocking smile, Eric revealed his true intention. He wanted to take Luna to pay an alleged debt. Luna panicked, not understanding how she could possibly pay for something like that. Eric's companions laughed at the situation, mocking her reliance on Ayame's strength. Then Eric declared the conditions. It would be a duel against Ayame, and the prize of the contest would be Luna herself. To make matters worse, he imposed a rule. Any support magic from Luna was forbidden. Ayame processed the information. The chances of winning were minimal. Eric continued to mock, offering an impossible reward if Ayame won, like a noble title. Worried, Luna tried to hold the swordsman back, but Ayame's expression showed his decision was already made. To formalize the agreement, Eric began to conjure a magic seal. The duel was set. There was no turning back now. The seal appeared on Ayame's hand, marking the start of the confrontation. With the agreement sealed, both sides faced each other in the middle of the hall. Eric warned that he'd start with a warm-up, and Ayame should prepare to lose an arm or two. But the swordsman wasn't intimidated. He was ready for whatever came. The seal on Ayame's hand glowed. Eric made it clear the duel was for real. Without wasting time, the noble conjured a rain of light projectiles, with a smile of pure arrogance on his face. The first attack came down with full force, aiming directly at the swordsman. But Ayame was faster, dodging by a hair's breadth. Simply defending wouldn't be enough. Eric watched with disdain. For him, this was just the beginning of the show. He then launched a lightning spear, wondering how long Ayame could keep up with his pace. The swordsman remained focused, precisely dodging every attack. Defense was his only option. Eric's confidence was unshakable. He was clearly enjoying the situation. Ayame, on the other hand, knew he couldn't keep dodging forever. The pressure was immense. And then, a pillar of flames exploded where he stood. Another last-second dodge. At that moment, memories of happier days surfaced. Luna's parents remembered how incredible she was. Since she was little, Luna had a special magical talent. But her father admitted that, compared to the capital's mages, he was nothing. He was proud of his daughter's power, a gift he himself didn't possess at that level. In the capital, the power of the nobles was absolute, a reality they learned the hard way, and that reality had a name: Lord Eric. His relentless pursuit was the reason for all that despair. Lord Eric's memory was a constant shadow. To him, people were just objects, tools to satisfy his own desires. His persecution brought disgrace. Luna's sick father could only apologize for dragging her into that nightmare. The illness also struck her mother. Luna understood that to Eric, she wasn't a person, she was just a thing to be possessed. The noble finally cornered her with a proposal, a salvation that sounded more like a sentence. The offer was terrible, but with her family at stake, despair left her with few choices. So she fled, alone in the forest's darkness, trying to escape her fate. But her escape only led her to another danger. Attacked by beasts, she thought it might have been better to surrender to Eric. It seemed like the end of the line, until out of nowhere, Ayame appeared. He stood in front of her, and in that instant, everything changed. Luna would never forget that moment. His strength and conviction were something she had never seen before. Together, they finally confronted the noble and his followers. The real fight was just beginning. Back in the present, the dungeon battle was equally fierce. Ayame threw himself against the monsters to protect her. He noticed the worry on her face and asked her not to worry. His words caught her by surprise. Ayame's calm amidst the chaos was impressive, but the fear was too great. Luna could only beg him to be careful. With a simple snap of his fingers, the noble began his attack. A wall of flames appeared out of nowhere, completely engulfing Ayame. The noble smiled, satisfied with his power. To him the fight was already over. But he was wrong. Ayame dispersed the flames with a single movement. The magical attack was completely undone. And from the ashes, Ayame's sword emerged, embedding itself in the ground right in front of them. The swordsman walked out of the smoke, unharmed. He warned that it was his turn now. The noble's confidence vanished instantly. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Without giving the enemy time to recover, Ayame prepared his next move. And then, he charged. The speed was absurd. The noble barely registered the movement. Ayame's strike came down with full force, but was stopped by a magical barrier at the last second. The noble scoffed at him. Apparently defense was his strong suit. He offered forgiveness, but with one condition: absolute obedience for the rest of her life. And with the proposal hanging in the air, the noble launched his attack, certain of victory. But Ayame parried the attack without difficulty. He advanced so quickly that Luna could barely believe her eyes. The noble and his servants were already waiting, preparing another spell. He looked at Ayame with disdain, finding the situation amusing. The noble confessed that nothing made him happier than breaking the spirit of arrogant opponents. He decided it was time to take the fight seriously. Ayame, however, was also preparing himself. He focused his energy on the blade, ready for what came next. With a sadistic smile, the noble unleashed his thunder lance. A shower of magical projectiles rained down on the swordsman. Surrounded on all sides, Ayame faced the attack head-on. The noble was confident, shouting that it was impossible to dodge that. But Ayame had no intention of dodging. With a single swing of his sword, he cut through the magic. The massive attack was completely neutralized. After nullifying the magic, Ayame prepared for a counterattack. He wouldn't stay on the defensive any longer. Luna and the other mages couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. That power was impossible. Enraged, the noble decided to take the fight seriously and went all out. But then, suddenly his own magic turned against him. The attack he launched was reflected directly back into his face. Wounded and in shock, the noble barely understood what had happened. Ayame gave him no time to think. He advanced and landed a brutal kick. The impact sent the noble flying. He was slammed to the ground with no chance to react. In an instant, Ayame was already standing over his opponent, completely in control. It was then that he revealed the name of his demonic sword, Amage. The fallen noble could only listen to the explanation. Ayame explained that his blade devoured any type of supernatural ability, including magic. And worse, it could return the power it consumed. The noble was hit by his own technique. The aristocrat panicked. To him, the existence of such a magical item was simply impossible. Ayame gave a final warning. If the noble wished to continue the fight, he should prepare for the consequences. The humiliation of being wounded by his own power was too much for the aristocrat to bear. The swordsman made it clear that this was a warning. The choice to stop was entirely the noble's. But for a genius like him, losing to a mere swordsman was simply unacceptable. Ayame merely replied that the noble had started the fight. That was karma in action. Blinded by fury, the aristocrat ignored the warning and attacked once more. Ayame, however, was prepared and blocked the charge without any difficulty. His demonic blade cut through the magic as if it were nothing. Suddenly, a searing pain struck the noble's head. Something was wrong. The dark energy began to leak from his eye. His power was spiraling out of control. Ayame's companions watched the scene in shock, unable to comprehend the sudden change. The noble rose into the air, enveloped by a completely different and far more menacing aura. The energy then transformed, revealing a new ability he had kept hidden. Ayame's oldest companion tried to intervene, yelling for him to stop, but it was too late. The noble unleashed his full power, invoking his final defense. The noble's final attack crashed down on Ayame, a storm of pure energy virtually impossible to dodge. Blinded by fury, the noble unleashed a relentless barrage, confident the fight was over. But Ayame moved through the chaos, deflecting each blow with his blade without showing any hesitation. Even so, the force of the impacts compelled him to retreat. The noble gave no quarter, preparing an even greater blow to crush the swordsman once and for all. Ayame, however, saw the opening he needed, and prepared an immediate counterattack. In an instant, he appeared before the noble, who was shocked by his opponent's speed. Surprised, the noble changed tactics, unleashing a flame power he had kept as a trump card. Pillars of fire erupted from the ground, surrounding Ayame and sealing off any escape route. The explosion was inevitable, kicking up a cloud of dust and smoke. But amidst it all, Ayame's determination remained intact. He wouldn't fall. With a single movement, he cut through the explosion, ready to end the fight. Ayame began to focus new energy. Wild electricity crackled in his hand. He raised his blade and invoked the power of the heavens, unleashing his technique, the Thunder Blade. The lightning struck the noble directly. Caught off guard, he had no chance to react. The impact of the Thunder Blade was devastating. The noble was thrown back by the force of the blow. But Ayame didn't give him a moment's rest. He continued his offensive, relentlessly pressing his foe. But the noble not only withstood the attack, he also retaliated with the same electricity. Despite the visible cost of the power, the noble smiled. He was enjoying the fight. The situation suddenly turned. Ayame was forced to retreat, defending against the unexpected retaliation. It was a clash of pure strength. Ayame's determination against the noble's utter madness. The enemy's power was greater. Ayame was thrown back, unable to resist the brute force. Victorious for a moment, the noble boasted of his overwhelming power. He revealed that Ayame had forced him to use his trump card, and vowed to finish him off for good. In his arrogance, the noble declared he would never lose to a mere swordsman, but Ayame didn't seem intimidated in the slightest. On the contrary, he smiled confidently. From afar, Luna watched everything, worried, but she wasn't alone. Two mysterious figures also observed. The hooded woman prepared a spell, and Luna realized in shock what was about to happen. The figures were interfering with the duel and amused themselves with Luna's attempt to stop them. Seeing she couldn't rely on them, Luna decided to act. She wouldn't let Ayame fight alone. But the magic turned against her. Suddenly, Luna was immobilized, caught off guard by the betrayal. She tried to break free with all her might, but the magical restraints were too powerful. Even trapped, the young woman didn't give up. She began to conjure a new spell with her free hand. With a swift movement, Luna managed to reverse the magic using the enemy's own power against them. Meanwhile, at the center of the battle, Ayame faced his opponent with a confident smile. Ignoring the provocations, the swordsman channeled his energy into the blade, preparing his next move. The electric attack collided with Lord Carter's defense in a violent impact. Ayame put all his strength into the strike, determined to break through the noble's guard. Lord Carter, however, seemed to be enjoying the fight, completely assured of his victory. Ayame then leaped, spinning in the air for a devastating attack from above. He descended with sword in hand, aiming for a final decisive blow. At the last second, however, Lord Carter realized the attack was merely a feint. Without hesitation, the noble unleashed a massive energy counterattack. The blow struck Ayame squarely, sending the young swordsman flying. Lord Eric could barely believe it. The attack meant to end the fight didn't have the expected effect. Ayame wasn't thrown far. He used the impact to propel himself into the air, preparing a counterattack. The swordsman dove towards the noble with incredible speed, turning defense into a lethal offense. He revealed that this technique was just one of his 7 sword forms. The strike descended with surgical precision, cutting through the air and hitting its target dead on. In an instant, Lord Eric's arm was completely severed. Pain and shock overwhelmed him. Ayame landed without even looking back. The job was done. The noble's companions watched the scene, screaming his name in pure despair. Ignoring the pain, Eric tried to use healing magic to regenerate his lost limb. But Ayame interrupted him, explaining that the move was futile. The healing magic began to drain from his body, accumulating into an energy sphere. The young swordsman had reversed the spell, stealing the noble's mana for himself and his companion. Completely humiliated, Eric exploded in fury. Ayame merely repeated the arrogant words the noble himself had spoken earlier. Consumed by hatred, Lord Eric channeled all his remaining energy into one last desperate attack. But the swordsman was faster. Before Eric could react, Ayame was already behind him, ready for the final blow. The final strike pierced the noble's shoulder. The shock of defeat was visible on his face. Ayame brought him down with a single move, putting an end to the fight. The blade stopped at his neck. The noble's life now depended entirely on Ayame's mercy. The young man made it clear that this was about the fight itself, and nothing more. Desperate, the noble tried his last card. He threatened to tell everything to his father, a powerful count. Ayame merely scorned him. Even on the verge of death, the noble could only hide behind his family's power. The swordsman's patience had run out. The noble didn't understand the sudden change in demeanor. Then, Ayame channeled a new energy into his sword, preparing something different. He wasn't just going to kill him. The noble needed to learn a permanent lesson. Seeing his life was at risk, the noble gave in. He promised to annul Luna's father's contract. The man knelt on the ground begging for his life. He swore he would never step on others again, but Ayame didn't seem convinced in the slightest. The swordsman already had a plan in mind. A seal glowed on the noble's hand. He smiled, certain the contract would be fulfilled and he'd be safe. But Ayame wasn't just going to annul the contract. He was rewriting the seal, imposing his own terms. The noble immediately realized he had fallen into a trap. Without hesitation, Ayame delivered the blow. A swift and decisive attack. The blow struck its target squarely. Ayame declared that, with this, the matter with Luna was settled for good. The pain was only the beginning of the noble's humiliation. Forced by the new seal, he admitted that his debt to Ayame could never be repaid in a lifetime. In a panic, Lord Eric's followers carried him away from there as fast as they could. With the danger finally gone, Luna ran towards Ayame. He embraced her, relieved that everything had ended well. Through tears, the young woman thanked him for confronting the noble for her. Ayame said he only did what was right, but admitted the fight had been thrilling. Luna was confused by his comment, not understanding what he meant. The moment of relief, however, was interrupted. Ayame noticed a griffin's body nearby. The wounds didn't match Eric's magic. Someone else was there. The dungeon's danger was still fresh in memory. Ayame tried to reassure Luna, saying it was nothing. Finally, they arrived home. Luna joyfully announced her return. The young woman was radiant, finally bringing her savior to meet her family. And at the door, her mother awaited them with a welcoming smile. She quickly recognized the name of the young man who saved her daughter. Ayame introduced himself humbly, leaving Luna's mother even more impressed with the young man. The mother wasted no time and already hinted at a romance between them, leaving Luna in a panic. In her haste to deny it, Luna blurted out, "Not yet," which made everything more suspicious. As they talked, Ayame observed the peace of that village, a stark contrast to what they had faced. Then, he brought up the main topic. The unjust debt that he learned had been cancelled. The annulment was only possible with the defeat of the arrogant noble who tormented them. Luna explained that the magic contract's seal ensured the agreement would be honored forever. As the duel's victor, Ayame's terms were absolute and could not be broken. More than the debt, the family was grateful he had protected Luna and tried to offer a reward, but Ayame refused immediately. He couldn't accept money from a family that had suffered so much because of that debt. Luna's family moved, insisted on thanking him in some way. Ayame held her father's hand, saying he couldn't accept money from someone who had already suffered so much. The man still tried to offer a small pouch, a symbol of his immense gratitude, but the swordsman refused. He said he and Luna would make their own fortune as adventurers. The decision was made. Luna seemed a bit surprised by his sudden declaration. Since he wouldn't accept the reward, the mother offered the only thing she could, a celebratory feast. Luna then pushed Ayame towards the table, ensuring he wouldn't refuse their hospitality. The first bite was an explosion of flavor. The food was simply divine. And so, for the first time in a long while, the family could share a genuinely happy meal. During dinner, Luna's father compared him to a legendary figure, the Sword Saint. He told him that even in an era dominated by magic, there was a supreme swordsman, a master of his blade. The story sparked a new interest in Ayame's eyes. His father described a warrior so skilled that not even the most powerful mages could stand against him. That was enough. Ayame slammed the table and declared his new goal. He would find this Sword Saint. Soon after, the new journey began. Around a campfire, they discussed the legend's whereabouts. While camping, Luna prepared dinner. She seemed a little unsure about her cooking skills. The young woman offered the food to Ayame, who watched her with a calm smile. But she soon cheered up, saying that cooking was the only thing she was truly confident in. Suddenly, the calm was broken. Ayame pulled her to the ground, sensing approaching enemies. Without hesitation, the swordsman eliminated the threat. The attack was swift and precise. In the blink of an eye, the entire pack was neutralized before they could react. Ayame reflected for a moment. Even Lord Eric needed others to strengthen his body. He didn't. Back at the campfire, Luna remembered how she used to enter dangerous forests like that one alone. She confessed that on the day they met, Ayame seemed like a true savior to her. The young woman became flustered, admitting her feelings aloud. Ayame listened in silence, processing her words. Shame took over and Luna cowered, hiding her face. He commented that she didn't need to be there, that she could have stayed home, safe. But she replied with a determined smile. Luna explained that this was the fulfillment of an old dream, going on a real adventure. Since childhood, Luna had dreamed of the world outside. She always wanted to see everything with her own eyes, on a grand adventure. And now, by Ayame's side, that dream was finally becoming a reality. She reaffirmed that this was what she always wanted. Soon after, exhausted by the conversation, the young woman fell asleep. Ayame watched her in silence, feeling the weight of that trust. He looked at the sky, reflecting on how all of it seemed to belong to another world. But the peace ended. Ayame felt something was wrong, and asked Luna to use her search magic. The result was terrifying. There wasn't a single monster nearby. In that forest, absolute silence was a terrible sign. Suddenly, Ayame realized the source of the problem. He gave a quick order. Even nervous, Luna agreed to obey. She concentrated all her energy, preparing a powerful spell under his command. Ayame watched calmly, waiting for the right moment to act, and with a single strike, the invisible barrier surrounding them was destroyed. The barrier fell, but Ayame knew the danger hadn't passed yet. He remained on alert. Without hesitation, the young man unleashed the power within his sword, and he launched his attack. The strike was so fast Luna barely kept up. The energy cut through everything in its path. The target was a small wooden house hidden in the forest. With the situation seemingly resolved, Ayame sheathed his swords. With the threat neutralized, the two approached the cabin to investigate. Luna went first, but hesitated for a moment before opening the door. But Ayame sensed something strange. Someone was inside. Suddenly, a figure appeared before them, enveloped in a powerful aura. The stranger apologized with a smile, saying it took him a moment to react. Ayame was impressed. Someone getting so close without him noticing was a sign of great power. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a council convened. The topic of discussion was an Eastern swordsman who had defeated Eric. They debated the warrior's identity, speculating if he could be the legendary Sword Saint. With little information, the council reached a conclusion. The swordsman's strength needed to be tested. The head of the Grace family had the perfect solution, someone who needed experience and a track record of achievements. The orders were relayed. The chosen one was Glear. The family leader questioned him about the Carter case, preparing him for the mission. The instruction was clear: test the swordsman's strength, and if he proved troublesome, eliminate him without hesitation. Glear accepted the task with a satisfied smile. The mission seemed to be a pleasure for him. Meanwhile, Ayame reached his destination. A man greeted them, explaining that visitors were rare around there. Ayame asked if he was the legendary Sword Saint. The man replied humbly, saying he wasn't that grand. But Ayame wasn't there for formalities. He had a purpose. The Sword Saint recognized the katana, identifying Ayame as a samurai from the Far East. He then invited them inside to talk. Inside, a young hooded woman appeared, curious about the visitor. She assumed Ayame was a challenger, but her master disagreed, saying he didn't sense that intention from him. Then the master revealed the reason. He had injured his dominant arm. Ayame was surprised. The duel he sought wouldn't be possible. That's when the apprentice stepped forward. She offered to fight in her master's place. The master accepted the proposal. He understood Ayame's circumstances and saw a good opportunity in the challenge the apprentice offered to fight. Since it would be a training duel, they would use wooden swords. Ayame had no objections. He accepted the master's terms without hesitation. With the training sword in hand, the young man thanked him for the chance to fight. The apprentice also prepared for combat. Removing her hood, she introduced herself formally. Her name was Liana. With the introductions made, the master gave the signal. The duel was about to begin. Liana swallowed hard. The pressure of the moment was real. Without wasting time, she took the initiative and charged with a fierce strike. But Ayame defended with ease. The force of the impact was immense. Liana's sword couldn't withstand the pressure and began to give way. She couldn't believe what was happening. Her attack was completely neutralized. That's when Ayame activated one of his abilities. Liana realized too late. Ayame's magic wasn't just defending, but also affecting her own sword. With a single move, he completely unbalanced her. The power difference was enormous. Liana refused to back down and charged forward with renewed fury. The exchange of blows was intense, a true storm of attacks. But Ayame defended each one with impressive calm, waiting for the right moment. He felt the weight in her blade. It wasn't just brute force, it was the result of rigorous training. But that wasn't enough. With a single fluid movement, Ayame disarmed her. Before Liame could react, the tip of the wooden sword already touched her neck. The duel was over. Her sword fell to the ground with a dull thud. Completely defeated, Liame fell to her knees, exhausted and unable to believe what had happened. Ayame then asked where she had learned that fighting style. He explained that her technique was for a battlefield, not for duels. Liame and the master were shocked by the young man's precise analysis. She couldn't understand how he'd noticed so much in such a brief exchange. Ayame continued, saying her style was precise and fast, but designed to be used in conjunction with magic. The master, who had been observing everything, approached with a satisfied smile. He then challenged Ayame, saying he was also excited for a duel. Without wasting time, the master advanced with frightening speed. He delivered a heavy blow, intending to end the fight quickly. But Ayame dodged at the last second, escaping by a hair's breadth. The master commented that instead of blocking, the young man chose to evade, a choice that revealed an absurd confidence in his own speed. The exchange of blows began, with both moving at a frantic pace. The pressure was immense, but Ayame didn't retreat an inch. Seeing an opening, he broke the master's stance with a precise kick. And just as he did with Liana, Ayame ended the duel with a single movement. The master, far from being annoyed, smiled. He admitted the fight made him realize he still had much to learn. He was genuinely impressed by the young man's skill. Ayame remained silent as the master began to analyze his style. The older man said that, contrary to appearances, he felt no talent in Ayame's swordsmanship. He explained that the young man's sword was forged purely through practice and experience, an immense effort. The master looked at Ayame with deep respect, acknowledging the arduous path he had walked alone. The master's words, however, caught Ayame and Luna by surprise. He admitted that Ayame's dedication reminded him of his own journey. The man confessed he was happy to have found someone like him. With a handshake, they sealed a mutual respect, forged through effort. But then the master made a proposal that shocked Liana. He asked Ayame to become her teacher, leaving the young woman completely flustered. Liana refused, feeling she would be a burden to the swordsman. Besides, she had her own matters to resolve. The young woman explained that she was bound by family obligations. The master apologized to Ayame for the confusion. Ayame agreed, saying he understood their situation. With that, the swordsman took the opportunity to ask an important question. He wanted to know why they were hunting mages. To answer, the master mentioned a sinister name, the Ripper. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The conversation had taken a dangerous turn. The name Ripper hung in the air, completely changing the mood of the conversation. Ayame processed the information in silence. The master explained that the assassin was hunting mages. Even members of the city's elite guard were found among the victims. He then looked at Ayame and asked a direct question, if the swordsman had ever encountered the assassin. Ayame didn't respond with words. His focused gaze revealed he had sensed something no one else there felt. The truth came out. As a swordsman capable of killing high-level mages, the master himself was the prime suspect for the crimes. Ayame finally understood. The barrier he sensed wasn't for attacking, but rather to protect against the true culprit. Liana was impressed. She wondered how Ayame managed to sense a magic barrier that even she hadn't noticed. The swordsman explained he didn't need magic. His own keen senses were enough to perceive the anomaly. The simplicity of the answer left both girls completely in shock. The master then questioned Ayame. If he was innocent, why didn't he simply declare it and defend himself against the accusations? He explained it wouldn't matter. In a world that values magic above all else, a swordsman's word would never be heard. The master showed sympathy, saying he perfectly understood the delicate situation the young man was in. He seemed to be putting together the pieces of a puzzle, forming a new theory about the case. Ayame remembered the dead griffin he found. The cuts on the animal were too sharp to be from a sword. The master confirmed seeing identical wounds, and then he reached a shocking conclusion. Those cuts weren't from a blade, they were from magic. The true Ripper was a mage. The master confirmed Ayame's theory. The Ripper was indeed a mage, one who reveled in their own carnage. He continued the explanation, revealing the gravity of the situation. No one, not even the Mage Corps, had the slightest clue about the assassin's identity. Back in the present, the master said goodbye, asking Ayame to be very careful. But their conversation had been overheard. Ayame turned, surprised to notice the blue-haired girl's presence. Caught by surprise, she didn't know how to react. He approached with a gentle smile, trying to calm her before leaving. Shortly after, Ayame and Luna went on their way. Luna commented animatedly about the encounter that had just happened. Ayame, however, was visibly uncomfortable with the topic. He tried to change the subject, but Luna continued, curious about the Royal Mage Corps. She explained it was an elite unit, formed only by mages capable of casting spells without words. But the mention of mages brought forth a terrible memory, an event that shook an entire kingdom. Noticing her distress, Ayame interrupted her immediately. He didn't want her to relive that trauma. Suddenly, Ayame stopped. Luna, who was right behind him, didn't understand the reason for the sudden halt. Sensing the tension, she used her magic to try and feel what was wrong. Ayame drew his sword. He knew they weren't alone and ordered the enemies to reveal themselves. From the shadows, a suspicious group finally appeared, surrounding the two. The group's leader mocked Ayame. He said that for an ambush, he should have hidden his murderous intent better. He underestimated him, treating him like a wild animal with sharp instincts, but nothing more than that. The situation grew tense. Ayame braced for the worst, while Luna could barely hide her fear. The mage explained the reason for the attack. Ayame was drawing too much attention for a mere swordsman, and with a simple gesture he initiated the attack. A shower of ice crystals was fired in their direction. The attack was instantaneous, but Ayame reacted at the same speed, deflecting each fragment with his blade. The mage's cronies were shocked. The swordsman's skill was real, confirming the rumors they'd heard. Annoyed by the resistance, the leader prepared an even more powerful spell, giving Ayame no time to breathe. Even under overwhelming pressure, Ayame didn't retreat a single step, ready for what came next. The enemies couldn't believe their eyes. It was impossible to deflect magic with a mere sword. Ignoring his companions, the captain unleashed his strongest spell, an avalanche of magical power. The massive attack crashed down on Ayame, engulfing him completely. Without wasting time, the enemy captain was already preparing the next strike, channeling his energy into an artifact. He focused all his power to ensure that, this time, there would be no escape. A vortex of lightning formed in the skies, aiming directly at the swordsman. But Ayame was unfazed. His eyes shone with a new intensity. He activated his own ability, imbuing the blade with overwhelming golden power. With a single movement, the young man cut the enemy magic in half, dissipating the attack. The shockwave threw the cronies far away. They could only scream for their captain. With the attack nullified, Ayame calmly asked if the enemy still wanted to continue the fight. The captain smiled. He admitted he'd already gotten what he wanted, data on Ayame's strength. And with that, the group vanished in a beam of light, leaving the couple behind. Luna, still startled, tried to get Ayame's attention, who seemed lost in thought. Back in town, the swordsman's reputation was already spreading. Everyone was talking about the man who defeated a griffin. With his fame growing, Ayame and Luna went straight to the Adventurers Guild to formalize the feat. Inside, however, some adventurers still doubted the rumors about the man who defeated a griffin. At the counter, the receptionist greeted them, confirming that the material appraisal was finally complete. She apologized for the 10-day delay, explaining the high quality of the items. Then she revealed the payment, an absurd amount of money. Luna was in shock. She asked how much it was all worth. The receptionist explained it was enough to build a beautiful mansion in one of the kingdom's main cities. She continued, saying that since it wasn't an official quest, the price was even low. After all, Ayame single-handedly defeated a high-ranking monster, an impressive feat. However, since it was his first mission, the guild decided to be cautious with his promotion. Even so, he received rank A, which would already allow him to descend beyond the 20th floor. The news spread through the hall. No one believed a rookie rose in rank so quickly. Ignoring the astonished stares, Ayame and Luna prepared to leave. But before they left, the receptionist called them one last time. She gave her personal contact to Ayame, offering help, knowing the difficulties swordsmen faced in the kingdom. The receptionist just smiled, saying it was no problem at all. Her offer of help was sincere. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a young woman was riding hastily through the forest. Her name was Liana Grace. In her position, she wasn't allowed to learn swordsmanship, but it was all she ever wanted. Because of this, she risked everything to train in secret, seeking to improve her skills on her own. Sneaking off the estate to train with her master, Light Sensei, was the only way to pursue her dream. Upon returning home, her mother welcomed her back. Liana was the eldest daughter of the Grace family, one of the 5 great elemental houses. Her mother had urgent news and asked if Liana already knew about Eric's defeat by a swordsman. The news was serious. Eric, the heir of House Carter, had been defeated. Liana became thoughtful. At the academy, Eric had graduated right after her, in 2nd place. He was an elite mage. The young woman couldn't believe that a mere swordsman could have defeated a mage of that caliber. Soon after, she was called to an important meeting. In the room, one of the family leaders got straight to the point. They would blame the swordsman for the Ripper's crimes. The man explained they needed to present a culprit to the people, regardless of the truth. The noble's honor was at stake. Liana heard the plan and was horrified. They were about to frame an innocent man. Liana was still processing the news. Eric, the Carter heir, defeated by a swordsman? She even thought of Master Light, but quickly dismissed the idea. She remembered him from the academy. Eric was the second best student, right after her, and was already awakening as a wordless mage, a prodigy. His defeat was simply unthinkable. Back in the meeting, the Grace family leader continued, stating that the culprit for the Ripper's crimes couldn't be a swordsman. At that moment, Liana understood the terrible truth behind that gathering. The man declared they needed to present a culprit to the masses, no matter how. The truth would be hidden to protect the noble's honor. He asked if anyone objected, reminding everyone that this was their duty. Liana and the young man beside her remained silent, shocked by the coldness of the plan. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the Eastern swordsman, Ayame, was already the talk of the town. People recognized him on the street, whispering about his deeds. News that he was close to rank Celis spread quickly. A swordsman at that level was something not seen in a long time. Ayame felt the stares on him, but continued on his way, indifferent to the rumors. The stories told about him were almost legends. They said he had defeated terrible monsters in seconds. To the people, he was a figure of power and admiration. The conclusion was clear: that man was the real deal. Little did they know that in the shadows, he was about to become a scapegoat. As he walked through the market, Ayame noticed he no longer went unnoticed. His recent fame preceded him. Suddenly, a commotion caught his attention. A group of thugs was intimidating someone in the middle of the street. They seemed to be enjoying the situation, acting without any apprehension. But before the aggression could continue, Ayame intervened, stopping the attack with a single gesture. The entire gang turned on him, furious at the interference. However, the young swordsman didn't seem intimidated in the slightest. With a swift move, he took down the other two. The remaining aggressor could only utter an empty threat, shocked by his strength. The victim of the assault, an older man with a noble appearance, thanked Ayame for his help. He was clearly injured from the attack. Ayame offered support so the man could walk, which he accepted, surprised by the kindness. As he helped him, the nobleman apologized for the trouble, but Ayame said it was nothing. They finally arrived at the man's destination, an imposing mansion. On the way, the nobleman noted that Ayame was a swordsman, which was unusual for someone who would help a noble without asking for anything in return. He then commented that despite society's hierarchies, deep down all people are equal. The man admitted that this kind of thinking made him an eccentric among those of his class. But as he said goodbye, he called Ayame by name. The swordsman froze. He had never said what his name was. The nobleman continued to explain his philosophy, saying that while there is a hierarchy of skills, there shouldn't be one among people. He admitted that society values certain aptitudes to decide who is superior, but to him that didn't matter. The nobleman concluded by saying that this was his way of thinking, and for that he thanked Ayame for his help. He seemed genuinely grateful. In front of the mansion, the nobleman offered Ayame a reward. The swordsman accepted the payment. The nobleman bid farewell with a smile. Ayame, however, was still stuck on a thought. The man said he would eagerly await the day they would meet again, leaving Ayame even more confused. The young man walked away. He still didn't understand how that nobleman knew his name. Upon returning, Ayame found Luna and informed her that he had brought the food and money. He asked her to take care of the finances, admitting he wasn't good with such matters. Luna was beaming with his trust, comparing the situation to that of a couple. Excited, Luna finally presented the dinner she prepared with the ingredients Ayame brought. The young man was a bit speechless with so much enthusiasm. She had prepared a true feast. The main dish was a meat stew, something he had never tasted before. Ayame picked up the spoon to try it. The taste took him by surprise. It was much richer and more complex than he could have imagined. Vobs, the food was simply perfect. He devoured the dish, praising her skill to the point of saying she could be a professional chef. Luna was embarrassed by the compliment, but deep down she thought maybe it would be okay if she kept cooking for him. Later, Ayame found her studying and asked if the lamplight was bothering her. She replied no, explaining that she was working hard to be able to catch up to him. The young woman seemed full of determination. Ayame watched her, deep in thought. He praised her for her dedication, saying she had far more skills than she gave herself credit for. His words of encouragement made her genuinely happy. Ayame called her by name, breaking the silence. The sudden closeness left Luna completely speechless. He stared at her with a serious expression. Luna was speechless, feeling her face flush. Then, his suggestion took her completely by surprise. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Once seated, Ayame tried to explain that, with his growing fame, it might be better for them to move. Luna's mind was already racing, trying to process the idea. He thought they should at least have separate rooms. But Luna panicked. She said no way, separate rooms were a luxury and would cost a fortune. The landlady reminded them they had money, but Luna retorted that an adventurer's income wasn't stable. She clung to him, insisting the idea was even worse. With his fame, living alone would only attract trouble. Ayame became thoughtful, considering her point of view. Seeing his hesitation, Luna got straight to the point. She asked if he wasn't happy sharing the same roof with her. She then revealed her plan. She'd gained access to the National Library and would study to become a mage as quickly as possible. Her goal was to become strong enough to protect him too. Faced with that determination, Ayame just smiled. He understood and accepted her will. After the conversation, Ayame started getting ready to leave, but Luna asked him to stay just a little longer. She was genuinely happy with the decision they made together. Sometime later, on the 10th floor of a dungeon, Ayame sensed a strange presence. Nearby, a group of girls was in trouble. They used what magic they had left to defend themselves. But the golem advanced with full force, crushing everything in its path. The impact threw the girls to the ground, leaving them completely vulnerable. However, before the final blow, someone arrived. Ayame appeared at the last second, saving one of them from the imminent attack. Without wasting time, he counterattacked the stone monster. The blow was precise, aiming for the creature's core. The other girls could barely believe what they were seeing. Ayame then leaped into the air, preparing the final blow. With a single attack, he completely destroyed the golem. After the dust settled, the girls surrounded their savior, completely impressed by his skill. Ayame's fame preceded him. One of the girls, excited, couldn't believe the rumors about him were real. It finally clicked. They were saved by a celebrity, and euphoria swept over them all. The purple-haired girl approached to explain the situation. They were there for a school assignment. She explained that, being from lower-ranking noble families, the task of exploring the dungeon was even harder for them. Ayame was surprised. He asked if they, being nobles, didn't mind associating with a common swordsman like him. The youngest of the group replied that there was no problem at all, even mentioning she had a swordsman friend. Ayame listened in silence, processing the situation of that group of students. Seeing an opportunity, the girls approached and asked what his plans were for the rest of the day. He replied he'd return the next day. The blonde girl immediately brightened, saying they'd be back too. That's when she extended the invitation. She asked Ayame to go with them, admitting they didn't feel safe alone. Later that same night, Ayame told Luna about the encounter in the dungeon. He confessed that hearing their story was a new experience. He continued, saying he agreed to help them the next day. Luna's reaction was not good at all. With a smile that didn't hide her irritation, Luna announced she would also join the group. The idea left Ayame visibly worried. That was definitely going to cause trouble. The next day, Ayame was thinking about Luna. He wondered if she had learned any new magic to justify her presence. He remembered how proud he always felt of her abilities. Luna never disappointed him. But the reality was different. While Luna excitedly commented that the weather was perfect for a dungeon, Ayame could barely hide his apprehension. She, however, was full of confidence, declaring that she wouldn't let her guard down for a single second. Ayame just listened. He knew it would be pointless to try and make her change her mind. Luna began to explain how difficult life was for commoners and low-ranking nobles. The social hierarchy, according to her, was brutal and merciless towards the weakest. That's when the three girls he saved appeared, greeting the group with enthusiasm. The sudden call caught Ayame by surprise. Luna, however, stepped forward with an intimidating smile. She introduced herself, saying she already knew who they were, and even nicknamed one of them adorable partner. The atmosphere immediately grew heavy. No one knew how to react to that introduction. But the tension broke when the girls, without ceremony, surrounded Luna, impressed by her attributes. Completely flustered, Luna was bombarded with questions about her relationship with Ayame. Watching the scene from afar, Ayame couldn't help but smile. Maybe things wouldn't go so wrong after all. The group excitedly headed for the dungeon. Luna, still processing the interaction, tried to understand the girls' behavior. Ayame listened to the conversation in silence. Even after leaving the dungeon, the topic of nobles and discrimination still lingered. The man, despite being injured, seemed relieved. He addressed Ayame, saying that for that time he would let the incident pass. But the pink-haired girl intervened with a smile, saying everything was fine and thanking everyone for their work. Ayame still didn't understand the situation. The mission, however, was a success. The girls proudly displayed proof that the group had reached the 15th floor. With their objective complete, they said goodbye cheerfully, promising to meet again before going shopping in the city. Before leaving, one of the girls confirmed if Ayame's next destination was indeed the blacksmith's workshop, and so their paths diverged for now. Ayame confirmed his plan and moved on. Now alone, it didn't take long for the young man to find the workshop. It was exactly the place he was looking for. He entered, observing the interior of the place with curiosity. His gaze swept over the blades displayed in the shop. He was assessing the quality of the craftsman's work, until one of the swords caught his attention. Holding it, Ayame was impressed. The cut and finish were of excellent quality. Suddenly the workshop owner appeared, a large, robust man who surprised the young man. But Ayame wasn't there to buy. He showed his own blade and asked the blacksmith to sharpen it. Ayame emphasized that his blade needed a blacksmith who knew what they were doing. The craftsman took the sword, confident he could handle the task. But as he drew the blade from its sheath, something immediately caught his attention. The man's expression changed instantly. He asked where on earth Ayame had gotten a sword like that. The blacksmith couldn't believe the young man had brought such a high-class piece to his workshop. He quickly identified it as an artifact, a special zero-generation magic tool. Ayame confessed he had heard the word artifact before, but didn't know exactly what it meant. The craftsman then explained that artifacts were the highest level of magic item that existed. They were items created by infusing immense power into weapons or accessories. The blacksmith continued, saying that some artifacts grant absurd powers to anyone who uses them, but others, like that sword, could only be wielded by very specific individuals. He stated that most likely Ayame was the only one in the world who could wield that blade. Because of this selectivity, some scholars considered these rare items to be useless junk, but for true artisans they were divine relics, their value entirely dependent on their wielder. The work was quick. Just a slight adjustment. Ayame took the sword back, completely satisfied with the result. The blacksmith mentioned that despite the age of magic, many still rely on swords. Ayame replied that the slight adjustment was what mattered most, thanking him for the great help. The artisan revealed he had met many swordsmen in his life. Ayame accepted the compliment with a smile. He continued explaining that in the past, swordsmen were the front line, but with the evolution of magic and monsters, things changed drastically. Sword warriors simply couldn't keep up anymore. They were falling behind, and it was precisely for these people that he kept his workshop running. The young man tried to pay extra, but the blacksmith, though grateful, refused the offer. He explained that forges face a lot of pressure, so he prefers to just survive, quietly and discreetly. He invited him to return whenever he needed, and the young man said goodbye. Ayame then made his way through the city. But something felt wrong. He paused for an instant. He had a distinct feeling he was being followed. And he wasn't mistaken. Someone was watching him closely, tracking his every move. Tired of the game, Ayame suddenly turned, questioning who was there. To Ayame's surprise, the person following him wasn't a threat. The stranger simply introduced himself with a friendly gesture. Ayame was confused by the approach. The young man didn't want to fight, but rather to invite him for a talk. He explained he was part of a group that shared confidential information, something that might interest Ayame. To prove his worth, he mentioned the mage's attack, a secret only Ayame and Luna knew. The swordsman's expression changed instantly. The young man continued, offering information about who was hunting Ayame and even about the feared Ripper. Ayame, still suspicious, decided to at least hear what he had to say. The young man smiled and guided him through the city. The guide admitted he understood Ayame's distrust, trying to break the ice with an awkward smile. They arrived at a place that looked like a hideout, and the young man confirmed that's exactly what it was. He explained the reason. Swordsmen were being hunted, and even the mage corps was watching them closely. The place was a front bar. Only group members could enter, ensuring everyone's safety there. As soon as they entered, several people recognized Ayame. News of his victory against a certain Eric had already spread. Everyone was excited, confirming the stories they'd heard. Ayame's feat was real, and had already become a legend. The group openly celebrated Eric's defeat, showing that the swordsman wasn't very well liked around there. The guide asked everyone to calm down so they wouldn't scare the newcomer with so much attention. One of the members commented that despite Eric being a horrible person, his skill was undeniable, which made Ayame's victory even more impressive. A man approached Ayame offering a drink. The young man refused, saying alcohol impairs judgment, and asked for just a tea. The stranger introduced himself as Finn. Ayame in turn also revealed his name, starting the conversation. Finn already knew a lot about him, mentioning that on his first mission, Ayame defeated a griffin completely alone. Ayame was impressed. The man had really done his homework. Finn continued his analysis, praising the precision and lack of wasted movements in Ayame's fighting style. With each word, Ayame grew more intrigued by the man and his information. Then Finn revealed the identity of the mages Ayame fought. They were soldiers of House Grace, one of the 5 houses that rule the ice. He explained that the elemental houses were 5 noble families, the elite of the mage world. The pieces started to click for Ayame. This explained why those mages were so powerful. Finn watched the young man's reaction, ready to deliver the next crucial piece of information. But for Ayame, politics didn't matter. His answer was simple. He would cut down anyone who stood in his way. However, Finn revealed the real problem. A mysterious figure known as the Ripper. Because of the Ripper's crimes, all swordsmen, including the Sword Saint, were being treated as suspects. Distrust against blade wielders was spreading, and the situation was more serious than it seemed. Ayame realized his error in judgment. This wasn't a simple rebellion, but something far more sinister. Finn continued his explanation. After examining the bodies, he concluded the killer wasn't a swordsman, but a mage. Ayame listened to the revelation, processing the new information. The method was brutal. All victims were decapitated and their heads taken. A bizarre act that made no sense. The situation was clearly delicate, and the weight of the investigation was visible on his face. He explained that, amidst this chaos, the appearance of a swordsman strong enough to kill mages was far too suspicious. Ayame began to understand. His sudden arrival made him the perfect scapegoat for the crimes. To make matters worse, Finn warned that the main investigative force was on its way, the elite unit of the Grace family. He looked at Ayame, making the warning clear. In that climate of distrust, the simple fact that Ayame was a swordsman was already enough reason to make him the prime suspect. Ayame, however, didn't seem concerned in the slightest by the accusation. Finn then expressed his hope that someone like Ayame might, one day, face the true Ripper. The serious conversation was interrupted by a sudden and very lively arrival. It was Luna, celebrating that the paperwork was ready. With a battle cry, she declared they'd go all out for the next challenge. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the leader of the elite unit smiled confidently. For him, it was the perfect weather for a hunt, and with a determined step, he began his mission. The leader of